With that being said, I think I'll get to my top films and worst films of the year, and then we'll get that out of the way, and then we'll go on to the Q&A and just have a good old cheeky chin wag. What do you reckon? So let me reshare this on slides with a PDF. That's what I learned how to do it. So let's start off with my best films of 2024. So these are in no real particular order. I'm just going to touch on each one, what I loved about them and stuff like that. It's a very mixed bag. There's a lot of horror in here. 2024 was a good year for horror, in my opinion. Starting off with Dune Part 2. I was late to the game with Dune Part 1. I had to play catch up before seeing Dune Part 2. And I'm mirroring what I'm saying in my initial review. You could take any frame from this film, take a screenshot of it and frame it and hang it up on your wall. This is beautiful, this film. It looks good. It sounds good. If it was smell-o-vision, I'm sure it would smell good, but it would probably smell like sand and butt crack sweat. So I think with the recent announcement of Austin Butler as Patrick Bateman, even though I don't think a remake is necessary of American Psycho, seeing his performances in Dune Part 2 as the villain gives me hope that he can do a good job as Patrick Bateman with being evil, narcissistic. I love when they're on that moon and it's the ultra, it's the UV ultra, just the way they've color corrected everything when they're on that planet. And that's what would happen. Everything would be essentially in monochrome, black and white and stuff like that. The sound design, like it's a stellar cast. Everything looks great. Everything sounds great. And it was proper escapism for me. Even though I was late to the game with Part 1, I had to play catch up before I saw Part 2, and I loved every minute of it. It was great. And I'm looking very forward to how they're going to cap everything off with Part 3. Next up is Late Night with the Devil. Dave Dalsmalchian, front and center. Finally, I love this dude. I think he's a somewhat impressive leading man, and I love that he loves his horror. If you've seen some of the videos on YouTube of his horror collection and his comic book collection, he's a nerd at heart, which is what you want. I love the concept of trying to interview the devil on late night TV. This was filmed down in Melbourne with a predominantly Aussie crew, which is amazing and so cool to see. I love the aspect ratio changing when it goes from when they're actually live on air, and then when it's behind the scenes stuff, it actually goes into full screen, which is great. The costume design as well, the practical effects that they did as well, like, when she splits apart and then when old mate's chest bursts open. Love it. Absolutely love it. Bits of CGI incorporated in here and there. In regards to the AI theme, what was it again where they used AI as for part of the set or to design parts of the set? Like, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. But look, regardless of that, love this, love the concept, love the ending as well. And I think Dave Dalsmalchian needs more leading roles. He's great. He's a horror guy through and through, and he respects the genre. He respects the fan base, which is great to see, and just how far he's come as well. Like, remember when he was at Arkham inmate in The Dark Knight and he said a couple of words? Now look at him. Like, so cool to see, man. Of course, Deadpool and Wolverine. I think this is the best pairing film we could get in terms of Deadpool and Wolverine coming together. The fact we got Hugh Jackman back in the blue and yellow suit for the first time was great. But then we had other variations of him. We had Tiny Logan. We had Apocalypse Logan. It was just brilliantly done. And yeah, there were a lot of obligatory cameos, but I feel like they worked. We had Wesley Snipes back as Blade. We had Jennifer Garner back as Elektra. And then, of course, Channing Tatum as Gambit. And apparently they're doing a solo film for him, which is great. Happy days for him. He's wanted this for so long, and then his solo film eventually fell through, but now they're back on board with that, which is great. So, and that monologue from Hugh Jackman when he's in the car, and I just love that gut puncher of a line. It's one of God's best jokes, that you can't die except it's on all of us. Like, what a fucking smack in the face, man. Next up, and this is a bit of a divisive one. Some people love it, some people hate it, is Longlegs. From Osgood Perkins, son of Anthony Perkins, aka Norman Bates from Psycho. We've got Nicolas Cage in here, who also produced the film in heavy makeup as Longlegs. And I love that we eventually get a backstory of the reason for his physical appearance. He's an old glam rocker who had a lot of botched plastic surgery, and over the years, his face has just puffed up, blown up, swollen. And it has this eerie quality to it. Now, in terms of the supernatural turn that this film takes at the end, I think that was the biggest dividing factor for people, where they're like, I'm on board with this the whole way through, or it just lost some people by the end. I really liked it because it wasn't too in your face with the supernatural elements. It was subtle to me anyway. But this is set in the 90s and it has a very Silence of the Lambs, Seven vibe going on. And I love the production design. The performances on a whole were great. Nicolas Cage is doing his thing and just absolutely batshit insane. Just, I love the fact that he based his performance on his mother. It's the almost birthday girl. When they kept him a secret for so long and the way they framed him, just half his face for a lot of the film's runtime. I think that was great. That opening shot where he bends down and it flashes to the credits and it's in your face. It's playing with your senses. I think it was great. And I do understand people's gripes with it for the twist that it took. It's not for everyone. But I just thought it was a nice little surprise of a film and just had that eerie factor to it. Next up, we have Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. This one really hit me in the feels, and everyone's going to be saying that. My mate Luke and I went. I've never seen Luke cry in my life until then. I've known Luke since 2001, our first year of high school, and I've seen him cry for the first time this year when we saw this film. And what I like is it goes back and forth between events with Christopher Reeve's life. It wasn't in chronological order, and it kind of keeps you on your toes. And then obviously his tragic accident happens, and then life after that for his incredible wife, who unfortunately and in a cruel twist of fate when it comes to life, passed away from cancer. But what was her name? Dana Reeve. They left behind an amazing son, Will, and then from Christopher Reeve's previous relationship, he has 2 other children. The 3 of them are incredible, and they're still doing work that their parents would have wanted. And I think that's so great. And it's very uplifting. It's definitely one of those things where, we're not guaranteed a tomorrow, even though he played the man of tomorrow. It just was the tonic I needed for a bit of a pep up and a bit of a dancey dance, like, go on, get out there, don't waste time, don't waste another day. Next up, it's a goofy one, but I really fucking loved it. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2. The first one, it was pretty surface level and you knew what to expect going into it. Schlocky horror. But the surprise with this one was its story and its twist at the end. And again, it's like Terrifier. You go into these films knowing what to expect, and it isn't going to be Hamlet. But when it took the twist it did at the end, where it's been the brother all along, I thought, what? So I don't know. It's definitely one of those things where a lot of people are going to be like, it's an instant dismissal. This does nothing for me. It's going to be, like the Popeye horror film that's coming out, the Mickey Mouse stuff, the public domain stuff, the schlocky, cheap scares, grindhouse gore stuff. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was brutal. I thought the suspense was great. But yeah, just the twist it took at the end. I did not expect it. I'm like, ooh, kudos to you guys. Like, you had some substance there. Next up is Inside Out 2. I prefer Inside Out 2 to Inside Out 1 because this deals with anxiety. Because I suffer from GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, and this one really hit me in the feels. And I love the way they map everything out with the different emotions. And then when anxiety comes in and they start fucking things up at the end, but they don't mean to, they're trying to protect the body. All those beautiful analogies. I love that because, when you're in the midst of an anxiety attack or bad anxiety and stress, it's your body trying to protect itself. And at the time you're like, dude, this is the worst feeling in the world. How is this protection? And that's when you see anxiety at the end of Inside Out 2. They don't mean to do it. They're just doing it. So I think it was great. And I love the first Inside Out. Again, it was such a nice, neat little surprise. And I think it's great for children to watch these films and get an insight in a way that isn't scientific and scary and unknown. You have these beautifully animated feelings, emotions where they can relate to it more, take those on board. When they're starting to come of age and stuff like that, they can relate back and be like, oh, that's right, this would happen, that would happen, when changes are going on inside you. So I think it was great, man. And yeah, at the end as well, when anxiety's losing the absolute plot, I think that's when it hit me the most. Next up is Smile. So I, much like Inside Out 2, prefer Smile 2 to Smile 1. I think it's great what it says about being famous and being in the public eye all the time and suffering from PTSD anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and stuff like that. I do think there was a bit too much of, and again, it was the same thing in Smile 1, seeing too much of the monster. I feel like we could have just backed it up a bit just in terms of glimpses and stuff like that of the monster at the end when she's performing live. But some of the one take shots in this film are terrific. The twist that happens with her mom, it's just wonderful filmmaking, and it kept me on the edge of my seat. But also the way things are framed, things are out of focus, things are in the darkness, things are that are at the end of the hallway, and then all of a sudden just start running towards you. Great, loved it. It didn't help. We had a really good audience as well. And then Parker Finn was sitting right in front of me as well. And then the next day I had to interview him. And he's such a lovely dude. He's so shy. He is super shy. And bit of behind the scenes stuff. When we got our interview footage, which we had to edit together, we also had to include at the end him saying, buy Smile 2 now on digital download and stuff like that. And he kept flubbing the line and he got like a bit frazzled. And he's such a shy dude, but I kind of respect that because he's in it for the craft. And I'm keen to see where he goes next with whether he does a Smile 3 or what else he does next in terms of horror. Heretic really surprised me. And it came out of nowhere, but through word of mouth and a lot of people that I watch here on YouTube. And Hugh Grant going against typecasting, man, this guy was just pure evil without being like a monster, so to speak, where he's ripping your guts out, but just with his words, he's a monster. Challenging two people who have a certain faith, and then it takes all these turns that you would not expect. And I think a lot of it comes down to the dialogue, the writing, but also the delivery from not only Hugh Grant, but the two leading ladies in the film. I think it was great. And again, it had like elements of Home Alone in it at times, and just the idea of them trapped in this man's house that's essentially a prison during this storm, and then they're down in the cellar, and then it just goes from there. And it's just it also has elements of Don't Breathe with the twists and what's going on down in that cellar. And lastly is Immaculate with Sydney Sweeney. I think because of the very end, that very last final shot is what properly won me over with her performance. And I know we are very Sydney Sweeney'd out at the moment. She's in everything at the moment. She's like a Zendaya. She's like a Timothée Chalamet. But I think a performance of that last shot in the film was just incredible and a gut puncher and a half. And you don't see what's going on screen. You just see her reaction. You don't see what's going on the ground. It's all with the sound design and her performance and her reaction as well. So I think it was great. I think just the twists and turns that it took as well, and just the shock value as well. When that nun hurls herself off the ledge, even though we saw it in the trailer, it was just batshit insane, man. So again, I think it definitely comes down to that last shot of the film where it really truly won me over. So those are my best films of 2024. Again, in no particular order, guys. There are others, honorable mentions and stuff like that, but those were my best. So let's go to my worst. All right, here we go. My worst films of 2024, again, in no particular order, and there's probably more out there, but these are the ones that stood out to me that made me go, holy shit. So first up, it's Kraven time, man. Kraven the Hunter, a film that had so much good going for it, so much potential, a leading man that gave a shit about the source material and tried his best in this film, but ultimately just absolutely failed miserably. Again, another Sony property where they just didn't know what they were doing with a Spider-Man-less film, much like Madam Web, which you can see right there, which is next up. And I keep seeing clips of this film now doing the rounds on YouTube, and the dude playing Rhino, when his henchman comes in and says, he's still alive or we didn't get him, and he's like, it's like the guy in Dumb and Dumber who drinks the beer bottle filled with Jim Carrey's piss. Just some of the design choices, the design of Rhino, the final fight, the fact that we get an origin/flashback scene for majority of the runtime. Have things start off with adult Kraven, and then, even though it does start off with that prison scene, that escape scene, which they released the first 8 minutes of, a couple of weeks beforehand, which was actually quite entertaining. That was probably like the best part of the film. But then this big chunk of the runtime is filled in with this flashback of their father, played by Russell Crowe, who's a man's man, and you have to prove yourself, you have to be a man, da da da. And then when they go hunting, they have a hunting accident. And just also the brother, which I didn't realize is the same dude who played one of the syphilis infested brothers in Gladiator 2. It's just a clusterfuck of the film. And unfortunately, fortunately now, this is the last in the lineup of Spider-Man-less films in the Sony Marvel universe. They've pulled the pin, rightfully so. Like, the only good thing that's ever come out of Sony with this type of stuff is the Spider-Verse stuff. And I'm so keen for Beyond the Spider-Verse or Across the Spider-Verse. Next up, and I'm going to be repeating myself much like Kraven the Hunter, Madam Web. Talk about a clusterfuck of a film. Interesting choices when it comes to filmmaking, ADR, and going back to Kraven the Hunter, strange choices for ADR, reshoots and stuff like that. The final sequence of the film where she's in the chair with the glasses and the girls are all, a tight crew. And I'm like, has she adopted them? Are they all living together? What the hell is going on? And the ADR with the villain as well. I don't know what his real voice sounds like, but watching it, I was like, this sounds like some very shonky ADI voice recreation, stuff like that. It's funny, the flashback at the beginning where you see the spider people in the jungle, a lot of people have given that design shit. I would have loved to have seen a solo standalone film based on those people, much like Apocalypto, like same vein as Apocalypto, violent, brutal. I think it would have been great. Next up, Joker Folie à Deux. If you had told me back in 2019, after seeing the first Joker, which I love, that the follow-up would be a box office disaster, a critical disaster, and it would be partially, for the most part, a musical, I'd call you a goddamn liar. This is one of the biggest disappointments of the year because, again, I love the first Joker. I think the world of Gotham in the first Joker was a character itself, much like Gotham in the Batman. I think Joaquin Phoenix did an incredible job. And yes, you can argue it's just a film about mental illness with the template of the Joker, Gotham, the world of Batman slapped on top of it. But holy shit, it just took the biggest turn ever when it came to Folie à Deux. And I didn't have a problem with Lady Gaga being cast as Harley Quinn initially because she's a brilliant actress. She's a triple threat. She can sing, she can dance, she can act. And I didn't think it'd be a problem. And then we started hearing murmurs there were musical numbers in this film. And I thought, okay, maybe it's just going to be subtle pieces here and there. Makes sense because the inclusion of Lady Gaga. And then we sat down to watch the film. And then there's that sequence in Arkham where Arthur's watching the TV and he breaks into song and dance and the inmates and the guards start dancing. And I'm thinking, what has this come to? And I definitely think it was one of those things where Todd Phillips had nothing else left in the tank. He didn't want to do a sequel. He apparently hid on a ranch the opening weekend of Folie à Deux because he knew this was going to be shithouse. And again, I do not like dumping on films, but man, when you had something so good to begin with, but Warner Bros. Have just thrown money at Todd Phillips and said, we don't care what you got, just make something. And he's like, all right, here's what I got. I love the little opening animation at the beginning, the Warner Brothers opening animation with, Joker following his shadow or his shadow escaping and stuff like that. I love stuff like that. But holy shit, man, this just took the strangest turn ever. And the very end, where we have someone who we don't know if they are indeed the new Joker, kill Arthur, shank him, and then he carves a smile in his face as Arthur bleeds out and dies. Is he the new Joker? Apparently the dude who plays the guy that shanked Arthur was told on the day they were filming by Todd Phillips, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to kill Arthur Fleck and you're going to become the new Joker, which is just a big red flag in itself. So that's Joker Folie à Deux. Tarot's an odd one, and I forget a lot of Tarot. That's how bad it was. And it has Jacob, I forget his surname, the dude who played Ned in the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. On paper, this sounds really good. It could have been really good. I reckon if Guillermo del Toro had headed this, handled this, directed it, written it, it could have been dark, twisted, very much like Pan's Labyrinth, where you're dealing with the card characters on tarot cards. And ultimately, it's the boringest film ever with a payoff at the end and a climax that just does nothing for me. Serious surface level stuff. And then perfect segue, very much the same, is Night Swim, a film I partially forget as well, because I'm just not taking this in. It didn't leave a lasting impact on me. The Crow did, but for all the wrong reasons. But we'll get to The Crow shortly. Night Swim has Kurt Russell's son in it, Wyatt Russell, and it's essentially a possessed swimming pool. I don't need to say anything else. How good did you think that was going to be? Second last is Imaginary, and this is from Blumhouse, and sort of, I wouldn't say it came out of nowhere, but also an imaginary friend that's a teddy bear that comes to life, kills people, and then again, like the payoff at the end was a strange one as well, where it becomes this monster teddy bear, but not threatening. It's almost goofy in a way. And there were certain elements where, we see the backstory of the little girl and what's going on with the family that were intriguing, but then gets overshadowed by this concept of the teddy bear. And there are certain shots now and then where the teddy bear is moving throughout the house, and characters turn around and he's just sitting there. Okay, I do appreciate stuff like that slow burn, that build up, and also is it all in someone's head that, this is going on. But the payoff at the end when they go into the imaginary world and it's the giant teddy bear and it's a big monster and it's essentially like the imagination of a child. But if you're going to make it a horror film, man, I don't know, go more brutal. And last, and certainly least, The Crow. I'll say this though. How cool is it that Bill Skarsgård is Pennywise, the Crow, and now Count Orlok in Nosferatu? First one and third one, for very good reasons. I haven't seen Nosferatu yet. I'm seeing it tomorrow night, but I'm hearing good stuff. I'm liking what I'm hearing, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. But when it comes to the Crow, man, it could have been so good, even with Skarsgård still as the Crow. Again, just odd choices. I don't like the fact, and this isn't a dig at anyone with tattoos, because I'm about to get one in a couple of months' time. The whole design of Eric as a SoundCloud rapper look and stuff like that, the way him and Shelley fall in love, it just seems so disingenuous and too quick. You don't buy into their chemistry. So, and then when he becomes the Crow, and the reason, and then, sorry, backtracking, the reason Shelley is killed, and then when he becomes the Crow and resurrected, there are certain points, like, the in between on the railroad tracks and stuff like that. I think that's an interesting concept. His design as the Crow, minus the Joker, Jared Leto Joker inspired tattoos, I just didn't really care for. I would have loved to have seen the longer hair with the bullet casing in his hair, the proper makeup. I know he has the eyes and the mouth for that matter, but man, do the proper, James O'Barr look. But then there are people that say, well, you got to take into consideration he didn't have the white makeup in the graphic novels, which I didn't know. Apparently it was just the black. So, black eyes, black mouth. And then at the end, with the shootout and stuff like that, and Eric sacrificing himself, it was just a clusterfuck of a film. And I don't want to be one of those people that's like, well, you're never going to top what Brandon Lee did. Brandon Lee's the only Crow. But in this case, yeah, you can't replace Brandon Lee, man. Crow City of Angels, you guys should really check that out. But also what went on behind the scenes and what the original intention and the original vision of that film was, could have been up there with the Brandon Lee Crow as well. They tried their absolute best with City of Angels, but the 2024 Crow with Bill Skarsgård, that is not one for the books, and that is one to forget. So with that being said, guys, those are my best and worst films of 2024.